Ben. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Good to see you, Simon.
So today we're going to have a conversation about the war on talent. There is a war out there for companies to get the very best in talent. And I know that you're an expert in the field. And I think it would be great for businesses to kind of get a bit of guidance on how they can secure the best possible talent for their business. So where do you think is the right place for us to start in this conversation?
Some background of the current hiring market is it is very specific around tech. My info on what's actually going on, but yeah, I could talk about the hiring market, what's happened over the last few years. That'd be a good intro.
Yes, let's do that. Okay, so within tech, what's kind of happening there? And of course, you know, you've got some of the really big software companies. They're all looking for, you know, the best people they can to try and grow their businesses.
Yes, I think what's happened since COVID, we had that boom, that tech boom, loads of hiring, over hiring, and a few years ago there started to be lots of layoffs. What's happened, there's been a big market adjustment where a lot of job seekers don't realise now how tough it actually is to find a new job. And also some companies, or many tech firms now hiring senior sales and leaders, are becoming fussier and fussier about what they're looking for. And often that results in a lot of companies all chasing the same small group of candidates and ending up with no one. And it's very labour intensive, of course, as well, with huge amounts of people, hundreds, if not thousands, sometimes, of applications for a LinkedIn job advert.
Yeah, it's interesting because about 12 months ago, I joined Oracle 12 months ago, and prior to that, I was looking for a role. And, you know, I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go next. I kind of knew I wanted a software vendor. I'd been in services prior to that. I think during about a 6-month period, I'd say it's a full-time job, just trying to find a full-time job, you know, while I was employed as well. And during that time, I think I must have applied for about 150 jobs. And some of those on LinkedIn are literally just send me your LinkedIn profile, and you're thinking, okay, I don't know whether you're going to get a call back from this, but yeah, at least 150. And I probably ended up doing maybe 10 interviews and about 4 panels, something along those lines. But it felt like there's just a huge level of effort and work with CVs and cover letters for each one of them. And then in each job, it was like showing on LinkedIn that there must have been 2, 3, 4, 500 people that have already applied for that position.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, you know, some of the bigger software vendors. What do you think was working or wasn't quite working in that instance? If there's such a small amount of talent, and then the companies want the big, you know, want the very best talent. Like there's a lot of challenges there on the business side, but also on the person that's applying.
Yeah, so I think you've got to look at finding a job, particularly in sales or sales management. Look at finding a new job as a sales process. It is a sales process, finding a job. So just sending your CV through a quick apply button is what everyone else does. It's easy. You can look like one of the 300 people applying. So I'd always suggest you make a note of all the companies you're interested in working for or applying with. Write them down, put them into a spreadsheet of some description, and work out if you've got any contacts there, and look at the network. And just like when you sell something, top-down selling, you go to the senior people if you're connected with them and start saying, hey, I saw you're looking for people. Can we have a quick chat? You're being different. Or pick up the phone if you know their number. So the thing to do here is observe the masses and do the opposite. So you don't want to be one of 300 people applying online. You want to be the person in sales who picks up the phone, calls someone you know there. Hey, I haven't got a CV quite ready yet. Can I just have a quick 2-minute chat on Zoom or Teams or whatever, just to qualify in or out, because I don't want to waste your time or my time. And I can assure you, you'll be the one or two people out of 300 who does that. You'll jump out a mile. And if you've got that referral into that company as well, you'll also stand out. Otherwise, you just get lost in this big sort of custard of job applications who don't really get anywhere. And it's frustrating, even if you fit the job perfectly. And I'm sure, Simon, there are jobs you applied for where you felt, I'm a perfect fit, but nothing happened. You didn't hear back. And you're thinking, what's wrong? Am I too old? Am I the wrong location? What do you think?
Well, yeah. Well, I think, you know, I always think about the recipient. In sales, you always think about the recipient. You send someone an email, you think about how they're going to receive it. You know, how was it communicated? But then, so the recipient of, you know, trying to get into one of the big software vendors, or just into any of the software vendors, is that they have a hiring team,
Mm-hmm.
and that hiring team, then they've now got 300 applicants,
Yes.
and they're also running probably 10 roles at the same time
Yep.
across the business. If you think
Mm-hmm.
about Oracle, you think about, you know, Salesforce or Microsoft, and so therefore they're hiring multiple roles. It's just the volume that they've got,
Yes.
which is incredible. So it's like, how do you stand out when not only do you, like, 300 or 400 people have applied for that particular job, but then the recruiter is also then working on 10 other job specs. So what they could be looking at many thousands of CVs and applicants at the same time.
It's a great question. I've been recruiting for tech firms for over 25 years now. And one thing I've never, ever, ever done in 25 years is try to sell my services or people to the talent or HR team. That's the first thing we're taught. Why? Because it's what everyone else does, and you're not going to be successful for the reasons you just gave. So the people we target when we're selling recruitment or people are the people who care, people who the power in the organization. Depending on the size of the organization, could be an investor, could be a CEO, could be a vice president of Europe, could be a chief revenue officer, could be a VP of sales, could be a sales manager. People who've got more power, the hiring managers, and then you may get pushed down to the talent team, but at least you got the referral in. Because I can assure you, if you just go to talent people, HR people, you get nowhere. Absolutely nowhere, 99 times out of 100. So sell to the power. Again, if you're trying to sell what you sell, you probably do the same thing. You can do the top-down selling, not start mid and go up. You're going to go top and go down, and that's how you'll stand out. And in sales, the CRO or the VP of sales will think, yeah, Simon, he's a great candidate. He picked up the phone, called me, bypassed all these other people. He's thinking logically and clever. He's a smart guy. He's a sales guy. I want to hire him. Versus, yeah, I'm one of 500 people just applying, chucking my CV into the hat.
It's interesting when you explain it, and it makes perfectly sense when you say, think of it as a sales process, because then you're thinking, okay, you've got to do something different. The difference is here you've got significant competition, and you've got, you know, just you're competing with significant volume. So actually you think of it more like a sales process, and you're thinking, right, what are all the things I can do to get noticed as part of this? But also then it's stakeholder management. There's not one person, one recruiter that's involved here. You are looking at, you know, the entire chain of command going up to the top, up to a CEO. So that means you've actually got far more people to reach out to, pick up the phone to. Makes a lot of sense to think of it as a sales process.
Exactly. And I'll give you an example. I was looking for a vice president of sales for Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the dark market a few years ago. And I had a short list of maybe 6 candidates. One of those candidates was given to me as a referral through the hiring company CEO. Immediately, that candidate is put on a pedestal. They're like, oh my God, that candidate gets treated really, really well. Because at the back of your mind as a recruiter, you're thinking, that's the guy or girl who the CEO referred in. So that gives you a massive advantage rather than Joe Bloggs who just applied through LinkedIn. So I think that's really, really powerful. And yes, a sales process, recruitment is a selling job. It's a recruitment process. It's sales. That's what I do. It's not HR, it's sales. And selling people, positioning yourself, the CV, the LinkedIn profile, it's marketing, it's sales, it's booking interviews, having urgency, getting the borrowed authority in, top-down selling to C-level. It's a sales process. And one question I'm often asked is, what about if I'm not a salesperson, if I'm an HR manager looking for a job? It's still a sales process, but you've got to do things differently. And if you're a good salesperson, you'll work that out and go through and do that. You'll jump through those hoops to get the job and stand out.
How is it? So at the moment we're talking about the candidate, but also let's move on to the business at some stage as well. But how do you? I'm thinking if you're looking for a job today, and you want to work for one of the big software tech firms, or just one of the software firms in SaaS or something along those lines. The challenge is it's knowing how good that company's going to be. Like, 'cause, so let's just say you're applying somewhere and you don't know anyone that already works there, but you think, well, I feel like that company might be great. But you just got no way of knowing, or how do you prioritize that? How do you say it's that account or that company over this company? And there's very little information for people to go on, is there? So it's a challenge to either. I mean, then when you start putting together that list for the first time, how would you start putting that together?
I would look at all the companies you've worked for previously. So if you work for companies like Snow, you put Flexera down. You look at all the competitors, all the complementary companies. Once you've exhausted that, you look at companies who might sell to the same personas or vertical markets. So if your vertical market is the UK public sector, write down a list and brainstorm at the top 50 SaaS companies who sell to public sector. And your message will be, hey, Joe Blogs, I recently closed £5 million in the last 2 years selling my SaaS solution to whatever, criminal justice, hospitals, wherever it is. Can we have a quick chat to see if there's a fit? Yeah, why not? That's what you do differently. So it's the vertical markets, your personas, your network, the countries, the problems you solve, the competitors. That's what's going to make you jump out, and the referral in, of course, if you have one.
And do you feel like someone should be like prospecting in regardless of whether they've seen a job advert or not in that case? So therefore you're actually kind of freeing it up to almost sort of find and create an opportunity instead of kind of waiting to see that as an advert. Because I'll give you a real example. I won't name the company because it's very well known. I don't want to get in trouble. Yep. I was interviewing a very, very well known company, one of the biggest companies in the world. And I was in an interview process with them, and I was about to move to a panel. And because they're so large, they also had another role that had just opened up, but it was in a different vertical. And I also said to them, I've also got real experience in this when I was talking to the hiring manager. And I said, I saw you've just put that role out yesterday. I said, so maybe I could apply for that as well. And I was amazed at her response. And she said, oh, that role's already taken.
Yeah.
And I was like, you put it out 24 hours ago. And she said, oh, yeah. And then she didn't have anything to say after that. And I just thought, you're putting out a role to get people to apply, and you're telling me that role's gone or it's not available. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I mean, I continue with my panel, of course. I didn't end up working there, but I just wasn't expecting to know that people were putting things out there, not necessarily having a job for people to apply to.
Yeah, they could be doing it because they have to do it for compliance in certain countries, or they're looking at internal candidates. But to answer your question, from a recruiter's perspective, why would I advertise a job? That's the first question. Why? So firstly, it's going to cost me money. Historically, when we used to use the Sunday Times years ago, 10, 15, 20,000 pounds. It's costly. The second problem with advertising a job, you get bombarded, hundreds of people all over LinkedIn emailing you. It's massively labor intensive. So what I would say is the vast majority of jobs aren't even advertised. You haven't got time to manage them. And why would I advertise a job? Because I'm desperate. I can't fill it. So it's the last resort. If I've already spent 2 months trying to fill it, headhunting, going cross network, I then may decide to advertise it and pay LinkedIn £1,000 because I can't find enough people. So sometimes it's through desperation. Sometimes it's through a company who's bought credits and they want to use them. Sometimes it's because they're compliant. Sometimes they're looking at internal people. But the last survey I carried out early this year, only 26% of all jobs are filled through adverts. So 3/4, there's no job advert on LinkedIn.
That's shocking.
I mean, why? I mean, as a headhunter, it's much easier for me to go, if I'm looking for a sales manager, working for a big corporate, I'll just contact people working for Oracle, Salesforce, Infor, IBM, Microsoft, put a list of 500, cherry pick the best 200, speak to the best 50, shortlist the best 10, and close the best 2 or 3. Much easier than advertising and spending a month trying to respond to thousands of applications who are irrelevant. It's an efficiency thing. And if I can't find anyone that way, if I'm really scratching my head, I think, okay, let's advertise just in case there's a candidate who's traveling in Australia, wants to come back looking for a job, missed out or something. So often it's the last resort. So when you've tried everything else, advertise it. I'm talking from a recruiter's perspective, because it's massively labor intensive, and it's inefficient, and it's much easier, as I said, just to go and cherry pick best candidates. LinkedIn's a big visible pond of big database. Why? It's just straightforward. And then I'm in control of the process.
It's so fascinating because it's the exact opposite to what the market is telling you to do, because the market is saying apply for these jobs. And I fell into that trap last year, and that's probably why I applied for so many roles. And in the end, the role I ended up landing really well, and I'm delighted to be at Oracle, was through someone I'd worked for already at SAP, because it's through my personal network.
Yeah.
And, I was reaching out, talking to people, and that's where the opportunity came from, because they'd previously known me, worked together, my current manager. So it was interesting because, again, that wasn't through an applied role. So it's what you're saying here is 70 something percent.
3/4 of jobs aren't filled through online adverts.
75%.
3/4. And me personally, I think the last time I filled a job through an advert was 2020.
So the big thing here, the first takeaway is if you're looking for a job, is don't apply for jobs.
Well, exactly. So I'll give you an example.
It's to go and create the opportunity.
Years ago when I was a student, I moved to a new city and I thought, okay, I've worked for Vodafone for 2 years. So what I'll do, I'll write to all the local telco mobile phone operators in that town. So look, I'm looking for a job as a student, part-time. If you've got anything going, I got offered 2 jobs out of 5 companies. Why? Why was it so much easier? There's no competition. No one else is writing to them and asking. No one advertising for jobs. So your competition is a lot less as well. It's you versus, how many people are doing that? So do you want to be one of 300 people applying, or do you want to be one of 1 or 1 of 2 or 1 of 3 who are being a bit more creative? And it's more efficient because the company hiring doesn't then have to find the time to go and advertise, manage the response, and go through that complete process if they've got a great person who's already contacted them. And that's specifically as well, if you're a small company, 100 people, CEO, you may not have or employ that big talent acquisition team who can support you through this big process. So it's very costly taking your afterboard as a CEO or an MD or a CRO and having to focus on recruiting.
Yeah.
So they recruit their friends, ex-contacts, and if they can't find anyone, they advertise sometimes.
What's the challenge for businesses? So businesses, again, I mentioned there's a war on talent. They want the very best, the top talent that they can to join their business to help drive it forward. We've just explained, we've just seen here that, the application process is completely flawed based on the volume. So what can businesses do to make themselves attractive?
Firstly, they can, if they're advertising, we're talking about specifically about how they advertise, because lots of them do. They do advertise jobs. It's making that job advert very, very clear, not vague, and be very, very specific about what the job is. And I'd also suggest get someone who runs the business to write it, not HRE. If it's like a job description, you fall asleep reading it. It's got to be salesy. Again, it's got to promote the job, where it's based, what we're looking for, exactly what we're looking for, the salary range. So make it really, really precise to try and reduce the number of people who apply. But unfortunately, you'll still receive hundreds of people who are totally, totally irrelevant. So the challenge businesses can have is, how do we reduce 1,000 applications down to 100? Because it's very labor intensive. Some of them may use like filtering. So when you apply, you may get asked 2 or 3 questions. You may know more about that than I do, because I don't use job adverts, but you might say, are you based in London? Yes or no. If it's a no, you get rejected straight away. So you can try and reduce it down by 2 or 3 questions. And then you've got the challenge, you've got 100 profiles to get through. Is then, how am I going to manage those 100 profiles? And that's where companies get stuck. It's, again, timely. And from my experience of going through this process, when you might find 1 or 2 brilliant salespeople out of that 100. If they're applying for your job, they're also applying for many others as well, which means the chance of you actually hiring that person, because they're applying for jobs online, is less, because they're out there publicly applying for loads of jobs. So when you headhunt somebody, it might be one opportunity they're looking at. They're either looking at staying at IBM, Oracle, or leaving. But a full-time job seeker applying for jobs, if they're brilliant at what they do in sales, they'll get multiple offers. So your chance of hiring that person is less if they're coming from a job advert as well, based on what I've seen in my career. So the advice would be less vague job specs, really sharp, really precise, have some sort of filtering, and then put together a process with urgency that's going to get you the best people quickly if you advertise. So that's the sort of challenges companies are having on the advertising space when they're doing job ads.
Interesting. What we've talked about so far is trying to create like the pool, whether you're the business looking for talent or your talent looking for a role.
Yeah.
And it's almost like creating that first introduction. What's when you get through and you're now kind of in the process, I've seen kind of 2 extents of, like, one of the interview process I went through was like 7 or 8 steps. It was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, okay, and what's next? Then what's after this? And then we're doing a panel, and then I'm meeting that VP, and then I'm meeting that, and then I've got to meet. And I was like, wow, like there's a lot of steps here. And I'm also interviewing for all these other jobs as well.
Yep.
So I'm trying to manage all of that together. That's why I say it's a full-time job looking for a full-time job. So there's 2 perspectives here. One is from the candidate's perspective. Let's just say they're planning for that first conversation, that first interview, and then you've got the business over here. What sort of things should they be bringing to that first conversation with, whether it's the hiring manager or whether it's within the recruiter?
So I think both parties, you need to have your 60-second intro elevator pitch nailed down. So as a candidate, hey, I'm Joe Bloggs. I've got a 10-year track record in selling enterprise solutions to public sector. I smashed my targets 5 out of the last 6 years, generating over £10 million. I'm here today because I was approached by this recruiter or whatever it is. I'd like to discuss senior UK roles with you. Let's chat, something like that. You've got to have a really slick intro. And if you're the company hiring, you've also got to be able to pitch your job specifically. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm the MD of XYZ SaaS company. We've been scaling at 20% year on year the last 5 years. We're here today because we've received investment. We're looking to build a new public sector vertical. Let's chat. So it's got to be sharp and slick.
And is there any best practice for the way to then approach that actual interview itself? So I've heard lots of different approaches in the past, right? So one of those was, well, the best salespeople will interview the interviewer. So they'll take control of the interview and they'll try and lead it. I've also been in situations where I've tried to do that and you're just like, oh no, this is not going to land well. If you know, so you have to kind of, is there a best way of approaching that interview for a candidate?
Good question, Simon. It's an inexact science because it's all down to the people, the person you interview with. They're all different characters. So if you interview the complete control freak who's not going to be told what to do, they might just, they're sometimes they're ex-military. They're going to like, don't talk to me like that. I'll tell you the questions. So it depends on the dynamics, the chemistry, and the people you interview with. But I certainly think that as a headhunted candidate, the best people going for interviews, it's got to be a conversation. It's got to be conversational. It shouldn't be an interrogation. It should be a two-way conversation about the fit for the role, rather than somebody just turning up and saying, hey, I'm desperate, give me a job. But two-way, definitely. But it's all down to the personalities.
Yeah, I definitely see that when I recruit. It's a conversation, as in it's just we'll get to know each other, we'll see if there's synergies, see if this is the right next step in your career, see if you're the right fit for this, and if you are, great, we'll move forward. If you're not, then let's chat about that. Yeah. You know, I feel like when you're hiring, you know very quickly, like literally within a few minutes, 10 minutes maximum, 5 minutes.
You think so?
Quite often you can have a gut feel. Well, as a gut feel to whether you can take someone to the next step, not whether they're 100% right, but don't know. There was something said that I don't know who said this, which is you make up your mind, you make a decision almost in the first 5 minutes, and then the rest of the interview you spend finding facts to support that decision. I don't know whether that's true or not, but sometimes I've definitely seen that in the past.
It's dangerous. There's something called the halo versus horns effect.
Okay.
Where you meet somebody, oh, they're a bit like me, they look a bit the same, got the same background, we both support the same football team, they got a similar background to me, they're going to be good. That's the halo effect, and then it can turn out to be a disastrous hire. Where the horns effect is, oh, they remind me of someone else we hired 3 years ago who didn't work out. But it's all perception. So be very, very careful, which is why some HR directors will do this sort of blind hiring and you won't look at them and it's all done in the dark a little bit. But so you've got to be careful of using gut feel so quickly. And how many of your interviewers in your business will generally have been trained? So I think it is an art interviewing, and it's a bit like driving. A lot of people think they're great drivers, but they're not. A lot of people think they're good at interviewing, but they're not. Are they asking the right questions? Are they hiring for the wrong reasons? Oh, I love golf. He likes golf. Let's get him into the team. Or he or she looks the right sort of age. They got the hunger. Where they turn out to be the laziest hire they've ever made. So you got to be careful. One of the things we use as a business, we use behavioral science. What that means is we ask our hiring companies, our clients, to fill in online a 10-minute assessment, and it generates the exact profile they're looking for in terms of the behaviors they're looking for, if they're collaborative, if they're lone wolves, for example. We then ask the shortlisted candidates to fill in the same 10-minute online assessment, and we put both results on top of each other, and you get a grade out of 10. So if you're a 9 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 for the fit, you've got the right behaviors for that job. And that's what an interview will not pick out and reduce the cost of a bad hire. If you're a 2 or 3 out of 10, you may have interviewed really, really well, but there's something not aligned there. And that's a really deep, detailed assessment we use in addition to all the other processes which our clients love.
Is that like a psychometrics?
It's similar, yes. It's not a test, it's an assessment. So it explains what type of leader you are. And you could be called like a analyst or a maverick or whatever, but it's the skills that we're looking for specifically, and you'll think it through, and then you'll align that with the candidates that were profiled. So if you've got 10 candidates you're evaluating, you can't work out which are the best 5. It's just another tool to give you that insight which of those 10 candidates are closest based on that behavioural assessment. And it's really, really powerful. So some of the CEOs we use, and we work with rather, they use that before the CV. They look at the report. It also generates like a one-page document saying, Simon is a really collaborative leader, high urgency, very, very driven, highly collaborative. So it's really, really powerful, and it's accurate. If it wasn't accurate, I wouldn't use it, because I share that with the job seekers we've run the assessment with, and they're like, wow. There's a guy yesterday, I dictated his assessment result over Zoom. It's like, how does it know that after like a 10-minute asking me these questions in 10 minutes, picking out words? He said it described me perfectly. So it's almost like you know what the chocolate's going to taste like before you open the box.
That's a great analogy.
So it's just another tool. It's not the test that's going to get you the job or not, but it's just something we use which is different.
And also that is far deeper than you're going to get from an interview, a CV, or a cover letter. Far deeper, because it's information you can't glean of like what's their real preference. Because you can interview anybody and just say, well, you know, what's your preference in this situation? When interviewing for leadership roles, they always say, what type of leader are you? I can say I'm a situational or I'm a servant leader or that, but the reality is I could be command and control, and they don't know that. Like I can say anything I want to in that interview. I can look like I have wonderful empathy, and then actually in reality, behind closed doors, I can be a totally different character. So it's interesting, like, you know, that you can't get that out necessarily in interviews. So I think that assessment seems like a great step.
And can we talk about cover letters that you mentioned briefly?
Please do, yeah.
So put yourself in my shoes. I've called you up, hypothetically. I'm recruiting for Salesforce. I want a UK sales director. I call you up, I headhunt you. Simon, I'm recruiting for a big brand. Are you interested? And you're like, well, not really. I'm happy. But you decide, okay, I'll go forward because I'm persuasive and there's some good stock options on offer. If I then turn around and say, look, can you send me your updated CV? You haven't updated it for a few months, but here it is. Simon, can you send me a cover letter? No, I'm not doing. Why am I going to write a cover letter for? You called me. Cover letters, it's like desperation sometimes. Why would you write cover letters, particularly as they don't get read? Who reads cover letters? Some people do, some people don't. If you get 1,000 applications, you then got 1,000 cover letters, you go straight to the CV. But as a headhunter, the best people aren't going to write me a cover letter. Majority won't. You're going to think, why are you doing that for? Can't you write it for me? You headhunted me. And remember, the best people often are the ones headhunted, extracted. They're not at home writing cover letters all day. I can assure you that, you know, it's inexact science again. And you know, if I did say that to you, look, can you write me a cover letter why you want the job? You're like, no, I haven't met them yet. I'm not desperate. I'm employed. Why would I do that for? And I often use sport as an analogy. So imagine I'm a football agent trying to bring centre forwards from one team to the other. So I headhunt, you know, a good Man City centre forward to try and put him into Man United. And I said, look, can you write me a cover letter as well? Why you want to go there? Like, no, go away. What are you talking about? And salespeople, the best salespeople have a bit swagger, a bit of arrogance sometimes. They're not going to do it. But, you know, it's hard enough getting a CV out of some of these people because for them, they're too busy. Busy people haven't got time to write cover letters when they're employed, and they've got that swagger. And they're the people who a lot of these hiring firms want to recruit. They don't want 20 pages and, you know, they don't want that. That's my experience.
Well, why then is do so many businesses ask you for a cover letter?
Because who run the job adverts? HR, talent. It's pretty, they tick a box. I don't know. I don't ask for cover letters. I've been recruiting for 25 years. I've never asked anyone to write a cover letter. What I do when I put forward a candidate, if I was representing you, Simon, for a job, I'll create a cover letter for you. I'd sell you or present you to the hiring manager. So Simon, based in Berkshire, 10 years experience, closed over £50 million. I've headhunted him. He's on a 4-week notice period. He's looking for XYZ salary. He specialises in HCM or software asset management, strongest verticals, X, Y, and Z. When can we book him in? That's how we present a candidate. That is a cover letter, but I do that for you. Again, it's a sales job. I sell and market you. Cover letter? No, I never asked anyone to write one.
Yeah. No, it seems crazy, but there was just when I was looking for those roles, there was a very, very, very high percentage were asking for cover letters.
Right.
And it just seemed like I can't believe you're going to read this.
No.
I just can't believe. So why are you asking for it?
It's a tick box, probably. They tick a box on when they create the job advert again, and they complain they got too many CVs. Write us a cover letter why you want the job. Well, no. Why am I going to waste time doing that? And then I apply for 150 jobs to get 5 answers. It's creating that balance shift that they want to be more, you haven't got equality. It's like you're down there, they're up there, and you're on the back foot immediately. If you start writing cover letters, applying through quick apply, you're on the back foot as a candidate the minute you start that process, versus referred in. And if you're referred in by the CEO or VP of sales for a job, you could be flying off for an interview with no CV or cover letter at all. You're just like they can check you out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the role I eventually got at Oracle, there was no CV and no cover letter.
There you go.
Because
I didn't know that, did I?
No, and also because the hiring manager knew me, had known me for a decade. So and I'd worked for him before. So and I'd had a conversation with them far before, and I didn't know there was a role there. I was reaching out to my network and going, oh, how's things? Should we have a conversation? So it was interesting, to know the role that eventually I did land on. Didn't need any of the things.
Do you remember when David Beckham was at Real Madrid and Real Madrid said, do you know any good centre halves? He goes, yeah, I know one called Jonathan Woodgate. And he tapped him up, he got the job. There you go. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but that's how a lot of it works.
So as we go through the interview process, so we talked about kind of those initial getting through the door. We've talked about then kind of getting into the interview. You said it's also quite a lot of people aren't that skilled in interviewing and being in. What's the sort of things that companies can be doing to ensure they're asking the right type of questions? Is it about being specific, broad? What's the best approach of?
So I think going back one step, you mentioned earlier on about you might have 7 or 8 interviews. I've heard some companies have 12. I've heard the stories where it's often the larger companies do that for whatever reason. The companies I recruit for, we don't have 8, 9, 10, 12 interviews ever. If they wanted that, I'd say, look, I'm not interested in recruiting for you, because all you're doing is putting barriers to prevent the best people I headhunt from taking that job. You don't need 12 interviews, you don't need 10 interviews. And what's happened since the lockdown and COVID with Teams and Zoom, it's made it so much easier just for everyone in the company just to switch on a Zoom and have a quick interview with anyone around the world, where before you used to fly someone into Germany, for example, or France, or wherever, and then have one day of meeting that candidate. So I think your interview process is really, really important. If you want to hire the best salespeople, I'd have 3 stages maybe, max. And how you're going to stand out if you're one of 3 SaaS companies or tech firms wanting to hire that same person, the first thing you're going to do is bring them into the office. You're not going to do it remotely. You might have a quick initial Teams call, but the companies who seal the best talent are the ones who've got urgency and meet them face to face. So it's the same for your job. If I don't know, if Nestle rang you up and said, hey, we're looking for a new HCM solution, the sales rep who's on the plane to Geneva has got more chance than the one who's doing it remotely through Zoom. And that's the same with hiring. So if you find someone who's brilliant, get them into your office if it's feasible. Of course, if they're in California, you're in Australia, it's a bit different. But if they're relatively local, drag them in, get them in, go for lunch, bond with them. It's a person thing, hiring. That's going to make a massive difference, and have maybe no more than 3 stages. The more senior roles can have more stages if you're meeting investors, but don't put too many unnecessary hoops between you hiring somebody and scare people away. That's what I would suggest. You don't need that many processes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic advice, because if I was a sales rep looking for a role and they're telling me there's 7 or 8 or 9, 10 steps, you're like, yeah, but it just doesn't make sense to have to go through so many steps. And also that the impression of that company is you're going to be hard to work in. Like, it's going to be complicated. And what do salespeople hate? They hate the complication of the big machine. They want to be able to be creative and do deals and have an organization that supports them. And it just immediately sets up a view of that organization that you're going to be hard to work within.
But also, think of the quality of salespeople you would attract who are happy to go through 10 stages of interviews. Of course, there will be some great candidates who will do that, but I can assure you not many of the best will want to go through so many stages. They just go and work somewhere else. They're not interested. They've got that swagger again. They've got a bit of arrogance. If I headhunted a great sales rep, said, look, I'm recruiting for Salesforce, that hypothetically 12 interview stages, they're going to like, goodbye, I'm not interested. Haven't got time. I'm too busy making money for someone else. I'm not doing that. You called me. So, but then if you're unemployed for a long time, there are some very good people unemployed, of course, who may go through those processes. But what I hear from the market when I speak to those people, I've had 8 interviews with XYZ company. It's been put on hold, or they hired an internal candidate. How does it make that person feel? So you go back to my initial views about how to find a job. I think you're going about it the wrong way if you've got lots of processes going on like that. If somebody wants you, they'll jump on you. They'll be all over you like a rash. They'll bring you into the office, go for lunch, and they're asked you to join. That's cross industry. You know, the examples I used earlier. You know, when these top football players get new clubs, that, you know, they're treated like royalty. They're taken out. They're not put through this awful process. But for a football player being out of work for 2 years, broken leg, trying to get back, they might be put through that process and not get the job. Same in hiring the best people. It's a two-way selling process. And if I look at the placements I've made this year, there've been less than 3 stages. The candidates being flown to offices, onboarded properly, treated well, and they're being snapped up with a huge urgency from the company. So you find a good person, you've got to jump on it really quickly, otherwise somebody else will.
Yeah, I feel like urgency is the critical thing in reducing the steps. One of the key steps is the panel presentation, the famous panel presentation. Have you got any guidance on the best way of approaching that?
Yes, I think I would, if you're talking about homework, where you have to go and do some homework. Again, most candidates now will do some level of that, I find, but not extensive. What you want to avoid is saying, look, can you create us a business plan for the next 12 months and spend all weekend doing it? And then we'll tell you the role got cancelled. There's a lot of that going on, free consultancy. So I think you can have a generic plan. It depends on the candidates you're engaging with. Unemployed people will have more time to prepare that. Again, headhunted, extracted candidates you're trying to extract won't have time or the desire to do much of that. They might do it high level. The problem for the hiring company, an unemployed person who's got more time on their hands may do a panel presentation than somebody who's busy closing deals and got less time to do it. So to answer your question, short, snappy, and don't make it too difficult. But the advice I would give would be talking about, from a candidate perspective, talk about the challenges you can solve for that company, what you do in the first 90 days, make it a mini business plan, and make sure you're aligned with the company hiring to make sure the fit's stronger. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're going in to solve a problem, but you're not there to give free consultancy.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. You could be careful on that, haven't you? So I've seen a lot on LinkedIn where someone said, you know, they wanted to see how I would approach this business, and then it turns into a business plan. I'm talking about broader roles than just sales. Then it's turned into, you know, not just a 30, 60, 90. It's turned into, you know, the first 12 months. This is how I would build the business. I would take this to market. I would do that. And it's like, hang on, no, that's free. That's consulting. So
exactly.
You could be really careful with that.
And I was trained years ago when I first went into recruiting that as a recruiter, you'll gain your market knowledge from candidates, from job seekers. Ask them. They got all day, some of them, to talk about it. So tell me about how Oracle tick in the background. Tell me about Salesforce. Tell me about who you compete with. It's a great way of extracting information. And some companies use it to their advantage for the free consultancy. And, you know, let's bring in 5 chief revenue officers and ask them how they scaled their last business from 100 to 500 million, and then decide we're not going to make the hire.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you go through these processes. The company I didn't want to name earlier, that role got put on hire after I'd met the VP, the MEA VP. So it was like 7 or 8 steps in. And I was like, okay, am I the only candidate left in this then? It feels like I'm meeting everybody. And then after that, it was put on hold. And after that, I don't know what happened. But I think they either went for someone internal. And that's also a really hard... That's also a hard piece as well. And now I don't know whether it was one of your LinkedIn posts, but it was definitely someone's, one of the recruiters that I follow. It might have been yours, I can't remember. But it essentially said one of the first questions you should ask is there any skills or is there any benefit to that you see from someone coming outside of the business versus you hiring internally? So is there any advantage that we have? Because if they can't answer that, then naturally they will go for an internal candidate.
Yes.
Do you see that happening a lot, where you've got externals competing for an internal for a role, and then you've got internals as well?
Yes. And why? Because I've been advised that many companies have to advertise jobs even if they're looking to fill it internally, so they can say again for discrimination and equality, they want to show they went to the market to promote it, but they've got no intention sometimes even filling it externally. So you're one of the 1,000 job seekers applying for a job that's going to be filled internally. So yeah, I'm quite cynical. I've been doing this a long time, But a good point you made earlier about the questions to ask up front. So if it's a recruiter, if you're approached or headhunted, is the role retained? Why is that a big question? Because if a company has retained me and paid money up front for my service, they got skin in the game, they're committed. Or are they saying, look, I'm not going to pay any money up front, but if you find me a good sales leader from Oracle or SAP, I'll hire them, or I might hire them, and I'll give you a call. You might, and if you haven't asked me that question, is it retained or not? You don't know how much commitment that company's given me. So all the stuff I do is committed, it's retained, but even then some of those jobs get cancelled. But at least you know that at some stage they're really serious. They've got to make that hire. Otherwise, it's like selling your house, an estate agent, stick it on the market and you change your mind. There's no penalty sometimes. It's the same in recruitment. So when you're qualifying your new opportunities in software up front, if you've got the budget, is the IT signed off? It's the same in recruiting. Is it signed off? How long have you been looking for? Why you're looking? Ask all those questions up front before you jump into a process. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, because now when I reflect upon the 150 or so, I often think now I've been through that process and seen how horrific it was.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would, now speaking to you, would approach it in a completely different way. The interesting thing, I suppose, is that there are times during that process I'm really beating myself up, thinking, what's not working here? Now I know more, which is those jobs might not even have been jobs.
Exactly.
Like, what was I applying for? We don't know. Like, they could have been jobs. They could have just been getting put on hold. It could have been just about seeing what talent's available. They might not have been signed off. There's so many other things that are actually happening there. Although you see an advert, it's so interesting to know that you need to kind of go and create the opportunity and not look so much just at these adverts.
And it's very similar with estate agencies. So a lot of ex-estate agents make very good recruiters because it's very similar sort of concepts, the way you sell, the way you go through processes. So when I went to buy a house 12 years ago, just up the road from here, it was a situation where you get like 20 people looking to buy the same house. Very, very difficult. So my strategy was at the time to pair up with a few estate agents. So look, I'm a cash buyer or whatever it was at the time. So look, and at that stage, those estate agents would take on new properties and they would send me all the details before they even put it on Rightmove. Because when they put it in Rightmove, it gets to mass market, they get bombarded, it creates more phone calls. So what estate agents were doing, they have their list of maybe 10 ready-to-go cash buyers who they send the best stuff out to first. And if they don't want to buy it, they then stick it on Rightmove. So think of it like that. But I was always friendly with those estate agents. I've shown them I've got the mortgage agreed and or you got the cash in the bank. That's how it works in recruitment sometimes. Mm-hmm. You stick it on the portal, because remember, when you put it on that portal, it's like whoosh, you get absolutely bombarded, and you don't want that unless you actually have to go. Unless who wants to be bombarded by hundreds of job seekers they can't help, who think they're a fit when they're not, or just spamming them. So it's very, very similar concept there. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's so interesting, isn't it, that you need to break the process. I always think about the challenger sale.
Yeah.
And in the challenger sale, what you're trying to do is well, it's a challenger. You're trying to challenge the process, but really you're trying to find a different way, a different route of making the thing happen. And in challenger, and I always speak to my sales team and say you need to find ways of breaking their buying process, right, or stepping outside of that buying process, and whether that's an extra meeting on a Friday, a weekly catch-up call, the odd text message. Yeah. They're all things that are happening that's not within the definitive buying process. That's you building a relationship with someone. And it feels like this is really similar to that, which is you're buying outside of an official buying process. You might end up having to do it, but by then you've already gone through the process, and then it's just the paperwork that you have to go back through. So it's almost identical, that you have to kind of create the opportunity, then be far more creative in the process instead of just applying for an advert.
Exactly. And if I look back over my 25-year recruitment, the recruiters who failed, lots of them failed, particularly in the early days, they're the ones who sold to HR, sold to talent because they were too unconfident. They didn't have the confidence to try and pitch a C-level or a VP level, even though it was easier. They sold to the wrong level. They used to get the Daily Telegraph and ring up all the companies advertising on there saying, hey, I saw you advertise, can I help you out? Same on LinkedIn. You're not going to get many jobs to fill if you just ring up companies hiring on LinkedIn. And the same for the candidate. It really is. It's you've got to do everything the other people aren't doing. Got to be different.
And then you get into the latter part of process, right? We're getting into negotiation of final offers.
Yes.
That's kind of the exciting piece.
Yes.
How much room for maneuver is there on both for both parties there?
It depends on the company. Some of the larger corporates will say, look, we pay 100 plus 100 with a 7K car allowance, benefits, 25 days holiday, that's it. A startup or a scale up might have more flexibility. They might have. So I'll give you an example. I worked a job last year where I thought it was going to be 120K base. It ended up being over 200. That's why, as a recruiter, sometimes when it's a new job in a new country, job seekers will say, look, can you just tell us what the salary is? I'm like, well, I don't know what it is. And I might rule out people because I end up paying a lot more than I thought I would. Go back to my analogy about buying a house. You might start up saying, I'm going to pay 500,000, but you end up paying 700 because you didn't understand the market enough. You end up going for more. But if you said in the beginning, I'm only paying 500, then you'd have missed out. So I think you need to keep a broad market, ask up front what the packages are. Some companies know what their budget is, some don't. So I think it's just being upfront.
How much flexibility is there? Because again, when I was going through the process, often
Yep.
I was going to panels and still didn't have a clue. I was like, well, this is are we going to kind of have an understanding of what it is? And it was like to be negotiated.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, but I'm expensive. so like, it's interesting because you can then go through. You probably have to have a conversation around ballparks.
You do, but again, you do. Going back to my football analogy, where Manchester United want to buy a centre forward, they want to pay 20 million, they end up paying 72. It's a little bit the person, what they're earning, what's their expectation, what they're earning. So it's a bit individualistic, again, depending on the company and the situation. But some companies will have a scale. Some company will say, look, we pay a 60-40 split on total comp. We don't have a car allowance. So some companies do have things set in stone. Some do, some don't. But as a candidate, I'll be up front in the beginning and say, look, I'm on 150, 300 OTE. I'm looking to at least get that or increase. So if it's not up front, can you please check with your hiring manager before we go through this process so you can roll yourself in or out straight away. So you as a job seeker can take control in the beginning or try to. And be upfront and remind them as well at every stage of the interview process. Look, if you just double check, I don't want to invest time doing a panel. I'm on 150 plus 150. Can you please double check that's in range? That's what I would do.
Makes sense to have that conversation up early. You've been in this industry, what, 19 years?
25 years.
25 years. I got that wrong. 25 years.
Yeah.
What changes, what challenges have you seen over all of those years?
I think the biggest change has been the lack of, or the change versus face-to-face versus the whole process being done remotely. So years ago, as a job seeker, if you're looking for a new head of sales role, you would go and meet 5 or 6 recruitment companies face-to-face. They'd meet you face-to-face. Firstly, that'd be the first time they know what you look like, because there'd be no LinkedIn, no photographs online, get to know you, that you'd have sent them the CV, versus now where everything's done remotely, less human-to-human contact. I think that's been a massive change, and you've got this extra tech in the way. So you now got emails in the way, LinkedIn in the way. In terms of candidate experience, I would say the candidate experience was just as shocking 25 years ago with job adverts. So think Sunday Telegraph, 400 responses. You might get an answer 6 weeks, 3 months later saying unsuccessful. It hasn't really changed. It's just moved online. So it's the digitization of the hiring process. LinkedIn, of course, has become the gorilla. That's what's happened in the last 20 years. That's changed things. It used to be Monster and a few local ones in Germany called Zing, for example. But in terms of the actual process for a candidate, nothing's changed. It's still, pick up the phone, get the meeting, use your network. So I think that bit hasn't changed.
And from a recruiter's perspective, like, is there any guidance that you can offer to the candidate? I mean, we've kind of been talking through some little bits here, but is there anything that we've missed that's kind of really, really important for the candidate to know?
Not really. I think just remember it's a people business. You're going to get more chance of getting this job the more time you have engaging with people verbally or face-to-face. The more time you sit there all day going through job adverts on LinkedIn, you'll have that downward spiral of negativity and mental health. So I think it's get out, meet people, target people, get referred in, keep going. But I think you need a good mixture of all the channels. So I'm not saying don't apply on LinkedIn, but have your various multi-channel approach that you reach out to your network. You might want to do an open to work launch on LinkedIn where your green banner for a period of weeks is there if you're unemployed, saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. You may want to reach out to target companies, pick up the phone, apply to some jobs, multi-channel. That's what I would suggest.
And from a business perspective, so you're of course working with like senior leadership within businesses. You're trying to find the best talent. How do we connect the dots then, so you can get that really top talent? I suppose you're focused around the headhunting, getting the very best people. How can they make themselves available to you, and vice versa?
Well, a lot of them aren't necessarily looking. Well, there are two ways. You've got the people who aren't looking, where you have to go and approach them and have a good approach. I send them a video of a job I'm running, 2-minute, high pitched, no mention of the client, which gets them excited. So they can, and they appreciate that, job seekers or candidates, because very quickly they go, wow, 2-minute pitch. It tells me all about the job without the client name, but I can rule myself in or out. They like that. They can then book a Zoom call. So the whole candidate experience is really, really slick. So I think that's important. But if someone is looking for a job, I think it's really important to have your LinkedIn profile absolutely nailed. If you're employed versus out of work, your LinkedIn profile is going to look a bit different. But the important thing is your LinkedIn profile is like your personal landing page, your business card. It should be clear exactly what you do, what you want to do, and make you jump out. That's your marketing tools. That's where many companies will go to first. Have it keyword enabled, so you get more companies finding you there, getting more approaches. If you are open to work, you can have the back end set up open to work settings, so you don't have the green banner, so recruiters will still find you. But it's marketing. It's all about sales and marketing yourself properly and networking, and not relying on the advertising too much.
It's been fascinating. Yeah, what a great conversation today. I've really enjoyed that today. Thank you so much for your time. And anything we haven't touched on that you think is important, either for the business or the candidate?
I think we covered most things today. I think we definitely covered most things. But yeah, I think the message is definitely observe the crowd and do the opposite.
I love that. It's a great thing to end on. So thanks a lot. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Simon.